Good afternoon, welcome everyone. My name's Michael Norris. I'm your MC for this afternoon. My background is in building and sustainability. I'm a sustainable build facilitator, and I also train owner builders in Western Australia, and also train builders in sustainability as well. So first of all, I'm aware there's an acknowledgement to country from the beginning. I'm coming to you from Fremantle, Western Australia, where I'd like to acknowledge the Noongar people. We've got 4 panelists with us today, opening their homes. We're very grateful, and we appreciate their time and presenting their homes this afternoon. They're all owner builders, all very interesting designs and homes. We have one in Angler's Rest in Victoria, a timber frame house. Then we have a mud brick and timber house in Hertzbridge in Victoria, and a 10-star rated steel frame home in Tamborine Mountain in Queensland, and a 1950s, what we call an adaptive reuse, composite construction in Glen Iris in Victoria. So what I'll do is we're going to introduce the panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists, the 4 panelists. They're going to speak for a minute or two, just introducing their project, and then we're going to throw it open to everybody who's listening in to ask questions. And I've got a few questions, and we just sort of open it up and go around. So I'd like to first pass across to Jeff from the Confluence, the timber frame in Anglers Rest Victoria. Jeff, welcome. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a bit of introduction, please. Thank you.
We bought this property in January 2000, and we started construction immediately. As you can see from the pictures, it's steep. And it's really rocky, and it had tea tree and melaleuca and kunzia that was 2, 3, 4 meters high. You couldn't even see the river that is now below the house. So we had a lot of work ahead of us. It took, I'd say, 3 years to get the shed up, roads in, and then it took another 10 years to get the house put together, so 13 years altogether. To get it to live-in stage for the house with the wooden floor part that you can see now. And, ever since then, we've been doing bits and bobs to put it back together, to finish it up, really, and make it defendable. We went through the 03 fires, basically the firestorm went right through our place and over our heads, but because we basically made the landscape bush-free and park-like, our place was saved, and so we just finished some cool burns and stuff. But in any case, I guess we'll talk about the house more in detail. But we have a little micro hydro low head system that powers our house, and it's been beautiful. So that's in our videos.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And just to remind people that those of you who are listening in, please use the Q&A section for your questions. If it's a general chat question, it can go in the chat area. But basically, if you'd like us to try to get to your question, we request that you type into the Q&A section. There's people in the background monitoring, and then we're going to pull up some questions, etc. So thank you. Now I'll throw to Nat and Daryl, who have the mud brick and timber urban house in Hertzbridge, Victoria. If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of introduction, please.
Thank you. This is Daryl speaking. Our aim was to push the limits of urban sustainability and to one day be off-grid, despite a modest 575 square metre block. We also wanted to use natural, recycled and locally sourced building materials wherever possible. Our architect, Craig Byatt, had studied earthships, so using this approach as inspiration, the final house design used these principles, including the use of recycled materials for construction, thermal mass provided by a rear wall connected to the earth, greenhouse to the north, and independence from the grid. Craig designed a reclaimed timber post and beam structure with recycled brick gabion retaining walls faced with local mud brick. Recycled materials used throughout include earth excavated from the site used for the earth berm and earth bag foundations, and Natalie's grandfather's tools crafted into door hardware by a local sculptor. At a 70 square metre house, it's small, but low energy, and it's got all the space that we need. Due to unusual construction methods, finding a builder was difficult, so Natalie became our owner builder, completing in 8 months. She transformed our block into a permaculture garden. We're thrilled with the home's success, and there's something special about needing no heating or cooling in the last 3 years that we've lived in the house. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. Did you say 70 square meters? Was that the total area?
Total area of the house, yes. It's
Okay.
7 square house.
Fantastic, because you're aware that I think wasn't Australia we up till I think a few years ago we had the highest square meter houses in the world. Does that sound right?
It does, but it's to me one of the key principles of building sustainably is building only what you need.
Fantastic. I'm coming to you from, I think, 36 square meters in Fremantle, in central Fremantle, Western Australia. So you've got double on me, but yeah, good on you. It's great to hear is that you can get all those benefits within 70 square meters. Thanks for that. The next person we're going to throw to is Matt, who has the steel frame 10-star home in Tamborine, owner builder home in Tamborine Mountain, Queensland. Over to you, please, Jeff. Matt, sorry.
Yes, hello. My name is Matt Luthi. The house is actually the second 10-star home that we built as owner builders. The first one was a timber frame, just conventional, which looked very similar to the ones that we just finished a year ago. The design and the execution and everything was done by us. Just looking up things on the internet, watching YouTube videos and things like that. We've completed the build of this house in 6 months from start to finish. Just doing what a builder would do. We hired the trades, and I was basically on site, a owner builder laborer, so to speak, just doing all the scheduling and the managing of the project, keeping within our financial limits, I'd say. It's quite humbling to be amongst you guys. I really admire your sustainable approach. This house is not so sustainable in the way that it's built, but in the long run, it's a positive energy house, and it has all low maintenance materials. So over the life of the building, there will be very little need of ongoing maintenance and input of energy.
Thanks, Matt. I might just ask you, you just mentioned that your feeling was that the house wasn't built, are you suggesting wasn't so much built out of sustainable materials? Can you just elaborate a little bit for us on your comment about you feel it wasn't built on a sustainable level?
Yeah, so look, you guys, as others here in the panel, they used recycled materials, they use timber, they use all sorts of materials, rammed earth and all that sort of stuff. I just use a steel frame, so this is like, it's like a slap in the face, so to speak. Hardy cladding, so it's all conventional materials. The advantage of that is that it was very easy to find trades and people and engineering, our goal was to get into this house as fast as possible, like minimize rental that we've paid in between the two homes, and as I said, the low maintenance aspect as well.
Great, thank you. Because in my teaching of sustainability, we refer to steel frame as being sure there's a higher level of embodied energy in terms of the production, etc., but it is recyclable and has a long lifespan. So would you kind of accept that that's putting a little more positive spin onto the steel frame?
Yeah. Any positive spin you can put on it, I'll take it. Okay, good on you. Very much so, yeah. Recycled timber, and the windows are not timber windows; they're aluminium windows. But aluminium, very low maintenance, and a very long lifetime. Timber windows exposed to the sun and the humidity in Queensland, constant maintenance, I think, from experience.
No, thank you. I mean, it sounds to me like you've, you covered off as much as you can. Like most things, there's a balance. So it's all about, as you suggest, the life cycle assessment, the use of materials, but it also includes the lifespan and longevity, etc., and the ongoing operational cost, maintenance costs. And I think you've done well. And good on you for bringing about your second 10-star home. I'm now going to throw. Thank you. I'm now going to throw to Trevor, who's going to talk about the composite 50s. Addition renovation in Norris in Victoria. Over to you, Trevor, please.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Hope you can hear me okay. Thanks, Michael, and everybody else. Certainly impressed by other houses here, particularly Daryl's no heating and cooling, and I wish I could claim that. But I certainly can say that our heating and comfort within the house, and cooling for that matter, is much better, much improved. And it's a silent sort of feature which is highlighted in the video. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the local Indigenous owners of the land before us, or the same as us. Just briefly, the house is a significant renewal of a 1950s house. It's a sort of property that is, in this area, is often bulldozed and clear-felled completely. Not a blade of grass of a beautiful garden often is what you see, and then a new fence, what I call a fence-to-fence house, emerges 6 or 8 months or 12 months later. So we've decided to renew this house. It's done a good 60 years, and it's of an age and was built with materials that, with a bit of rejuvenation, will go another 60 years, I reckon. It's probably not the financial driver that would happen mostly in the suburbs, but we live here, and we wanted to improve things. I might say that, the most sustainable renovation you do might be one that you don't do, because we do use a lot of resources when we do fix up a house, as well as when we bulldoze and start again. A couple of areas, and we just don't have time to go into all the detail, of course, but I just noticed setting up here, where today is probably close to equinox, today or tomorrow, and I just got caught by the sun. One of the things I would say to people if they're looking is get really familiar with your site and how the sun interacts with it. If it's an existing building, how it interacts with that. If it's going to be a new building, then obviously simulations, that sort of thing, can help a lot. But I just got caught out by the sun in my eyes because I'm sitting in a spot doing Zoom, which I don't normally do from here. And so I've had to move the whole table and chairs and all. So a key thing, I'm probably running out of time so far, so I'll stop there, and there's plenty of other topics we can cover.
Good on you, Trevor. Thank you. Just for those listening, we now generally these days use the word deconstruction. So in the past, we've sort of considered it to be demolition, but more often now we sort of suggest it's deconstruction, being that you can, you bring the existing build down, whatever the structure is, you try to reclaim as much as possible, reuse as much as possible, and minimize your waste going out, and obviously minimize the end product, going to landfill. So this afternoon is thank you all for your presentations, and just advising those people listening that they're all available for questions. I'll be facilitating with people in the background, helping us out in terms of the technology and editing, etc. And it being as it's owner builders, I'm going to try and keep focus on owner builders, and obviously look at issues around, time frames, budgets, what were the challenging issues, what were the most enjoyable parts, and just some hints and tips that you can give others who are considering becoming owner builders. I might just start with a positive spin. Just see who'd like to answer the question up front. What was the most enjoyable part of the experience? Maybe you're in my top left corner, Daryl. Maybe you could go first. What was the most enjoyable part?
Well, ours is a post and beam house on a concrete slab. The most enjoyable part was seeing these beautiful recycled red gum posts and beams. When that part was completed, you could see what the house was going to look like, and from then on in, it was a lot of work.
But it sounds, does that mean it was enjoyable work?
Well, it was. There were times making recycled brick gabions, making earth bag foundations, and making mud brick walls were really thin after the first few weeks, I can tell you, but the rest of it was really enjoyable.
So it's all about getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
And Matt, what would you suggest was the, I'm obviously going to ask about the challenging aspects, but what was the most enjoyable part?
Moving in.
Oh, good. Good on you. Jump straight to the moving in. Yes, all right. Well, good. Well, in that case, we'll move on to Jed. Good on you. Good on you.
No, I'm not.
Okay, go on.
Sorry. So it was a bit of a joke. Yes, I really enjoyed watching the frame come up, because it was amazing how fast it went, and yes, as Daryl said, it's just amazing to see the structure standing there, and it's one thing to sit in front of a desk and work on the plans and everything, and then actually seeing the things arrive and then being put up. That's just a real cool experience. Yeah, that's it.
Good on you. Thank you. And Jeff, you're my next on the screen.
Well, obviously moving into the house was really nice, but we have what I call the best deck on earth. So, we look down on our little river that flows all year long, which is where our microhydro is. And, having a cup of coffee in the morning or a whiskey in the afternoon is probably the most enjoyable part. And the other enjoyable part that I think is pretty good is when I was building, everybody was knocking me for doing, oh, you don't have to do this, mate. You don't have to do that, mate. Oh, you don't need 6x2s, and oh, you don't need all that insulation. And some of those very same people came into the house when it was over 40 degrees outside one summer day. And the first thing they said was, mate, do you have air conditioning in this place? So that was pretty. They thought we were fools, but we've got a great place now.
Well done. And Trevor, just a little, sort of a brief kind of, bit of a spin on your experience.
Yeah. So I say personally, I mean, other people, members of the family would say different things, but personally, was the opportunity being on a building process to work with the tradespeople to fully develop and implement some ideas that were very rough in the beginning. And to be able to incorporate those. And I guess one was the we've got a big picture window which sort of fits with the era, but I used to describe it as an energy disaster, single glazed, plenty of gaps and cracks in relation to it, and its heat load is too much for summer and winter, huge heat loss. And to be able to renovate that without fully replacing it, but partial replacement, came out of that process of discussion and the quandaries, standing around looking at it and thinking, well, how can we do this without huge expense and within reusing the good parts of it, replacing the bits that don't work. And that turned out, if you look at it, you wouldn't know that it's been changed. It's worked really well.
Good on you. Thank you. I'll throw to one of the audience questions. The question reads, was it easy to obtain the owner-builder license, and did the training help the process? That's the first part of the question. Second part is, did you have building experience before this? So maybe a hands up from our panelists to make it a bit easier for me to throw to one of you to answer that question. Was it, how difficult was it to obtain the owner-builder license, and did training help? And did you have some previous building experience? Whose hand's going up here? Yep, Matt first. Thanks, Matt.
Well, at least in Queensland, I did an online course, and that took me the best part of half a day, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a piece of cake for the average person, but it doesn't really prepare you for the real thing. So I strongly encourage you to do some more research on what has to happen for a whole beginning to end sort of process. And I've done it twice. So the first time was a little bit more of a steeper learning curve. The second time was a real smooth process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And whilst we're on this sort of subject, in terms of the most challenging parts, and what advice would you give in general advice initially to people who are considering, becoming owner builders? I'll just ask for another show of hands again. Anything that sort of stands out as being something you just say up front to a person or persons considering to be an owner builder? One of your hands up. Yep, good on you, Daryl.
I think one thing to consider is how you're going to fund it. So for us in Victoria, none of the banks would give us a loan to build as an owner builder. So we had to get it to certificate of occupancy without a bank loan. So I think there are some other considerations. And then just it is hard. Getting qualified to be an owner builder and doing that stuff isn't that difficult. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good on you. Thank you. And whilst you're on that subject as well, in terms of encountering issues and challenges, it's a question here for Trevor. With the 50s house, did you encounter any asbestos during the process? And how did you or would you deal with that?
Well, lots of questions. Good questions.
Yeah, they are good questions.
I'll just say about the owner builder license. Really, that is it's moving the risk to avoid an issue with builders signing up naive people to be owner builders without the full knowledge and understanding of that. So it certainly doesn't train you for being an owner builder. That's in Victoria anyway. Asbestos, yes, plenty of asbestos actually. And how do we deal with it? Very carefully. And I undertook to replace it myself. You're allowed to do that in Victoria, at least you were when we started that 3 or so years ago. And yes, any building up until the 70s, I think, or even 80s is likely to have asbestos. And you need to be able to get rid of it, and you do it very carefully. That's a glib thing to say, but and the problem with it is that it just turns up in all sorts of odd places as well. You think you've got rid of it all, you remove a light fitting, and there's a little bit of asbestos that's been used as a packer in a ceiling space or something. The ground underneath older buildings may be littered with offcuts of asbestos from the eaves or wherever else it's used. It may be behind tiles in all sorts of places. So yes, it's definitely an issue. And I know the tradesmen were impressed that I was very careful. And I was. It's not something you want to play around with or treat lightly.
No, good on you. And whilst we're on this subject, talking about, owner builders and the learning and the experience and gaining your approval, in Western Australia we call it owner builder approval. Do remind the audience we're coming to you, all across Australia. So obviously varies from state to state, and maybe just a little bit of, what once the person does some owner builder training, what would you think was a good add-on experience? Maybe I can throw to who we've got here. Maybe I'll throw to Matt this time. Is what do you think would be some good add-on knowledge experience to get up to speed on before you go ahead with your owner build?
Sounds simple. I've read the Australian owner builder book and the Australian owner builder renovation book. Mm-hmm. I read tons of other books. I watched YouTube videos.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just so you just have to be aware of the stages that you go through when you put up a building and what sort of approvals you require, and you can look at the council forms, get plumbing approval, get building
mm-hmm.
approval, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question coming. Oh, sorry. Jeff's got his hand up. Go ahead, Jeff. Unmute, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. We found that at least 20 years ago and 15 years ago when we were still building that, the Shire and the agencies that would have to approve the building, all the different building codes and stuff, they didn't have any clue on composting toilets, gray water systems, microhydros. They really, threw their hands up, and when they're in that position, oftentimes they'll just say, no, sorry. And so we found that just putting in, adding to the mix an engineer that they knew and throwing $500 their way to just write a little document that said, oh yeah, this is cool, we've used it before and it worked. Or paying somebody to, design, even though I'd already designed the house, to draw up the actual plans in a format that the Shire liked. That really helped a lot, and it smoothed the process, and it saved us so much time that it was worth the expense.
Oh, good on you, Jeff. Thank you. And Matt, you threw your hand up there for a second.
Yeah, that's right. So I was quite aware of the difficulties that you can encounter if you go outside the normal building material, sort of, straw bale, rammed earth, all that sort of stuff. You find it will be more difficult for council to approve your request and your building. Also to find tradespeople to actually put up your house and electricians and plumbers and things like that. So our choice to just go conventional, steel frame was normal cladding that you just get from Bunnings. It's just really makes the process so much simpler because it's just everybody knows how it works. The design of the house itself, that's something that we did ourselves because I found at the time, like especially with the first time and actually the second time as well, we didn't really find anyone that was very excited to work on a 10-star house at all. Passive solar design, unheard of. And I only found Renew half a year ago after we finished this house, and I thought, oh well, there's actually people in Australia that care about this sort of stuff. So So yeah, we did the design RO, and then everything else, building material, just use conventional materials because you'll find people, you can get quotes for work, and you know, there might be a neighbor, it might be a plumber or a carpenter, and they know exactly what you need to do. So that helps. Right. That makes it easier for another builder. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great because it sort of feeds into a couple of other questions, a bit of a segue here, because one of the questions that's popped up is, did you have many difficulties getting various approvals? I might throw to Daryl just to keep spreading it around. Any difficulties around approvals? I guess that in this case, it would be planning approval, you know, building permit. I'll use the terminology we use in Western Australia. I think hopefully it's nationwide. Building permit, development approval, you know, planning approval, bushfire. Any difficulties around that? Being an owner builder and or the design you chose, the construction you chose.
We didn't, but that was because we used an architect who's a local guy who's built lots of sustainable houses in this shire, and so when our planning application went in, he also had a surveyor who's used to unusual building methods, and so when our application went in, everything went in that he knew the council would ask for, and it was approved really quickly. So we didn't have a problem really with that. I think because we used someone who was familiar, and I think Trevor and Jeffe and all of them have talked about doing that, I think.
Mm-hmm. I might just throw across to the four of you, just open up to say, did any of you have any particular issues around an approval? And if you did, how did you deal with it? Just a hand up. Yep, Trevor's hand's coming up. Yep, thanks, Trevor.
I just totally answered the previous question. Do lots of homework, lots and lots of homework. But one of the things that did throw up for us was finding an engineer. And then once work had started, we needed more engineering work because of an unknown issue. That comes along with a renovation as opposed to a new build, I guess. And that was a simple thing, like you may have seen the big beam we put in to replace a wall. We discovered when we started digging under the house that if we could extend the length of that beam by, you know, it was a small amount, 300 or perhaps 500 millimeters, then we could use existing footings rather than dig a new footing, which had a lot of advantage, both labour and just the possibility of doing it. But it did require a much beefed up beam, going from 250 to 300 millimeter beam. And of course the cost that goes with that. And there were some other issues with being an older building, finding an engineer that whilst there's lots of engineering, most of the suburban shopping strips around here have got an engineer's office up somewhere. Not many engineers want to work with a small job, a household job, or if they do, they'll charge you a very high price. So we were lucky to find somebody, but there's some issues there too. We had some, what I would say is over-engineered or very cautious engineering. We've got foundations in a bathroom that will hold a 40-story building, I think.
All right, good on you. Thank you. Another question coming in for a newbie, new person who's just about to embark on a build. Basically, the question's about how do you organise trades and materials and storage, and what resources do you use to sort of plan the process. So I think it's a question around scheduling. How did you source your tradies? How do you organise them and your materials? A bit of I saw Jeff's hand go, a little bit of a sort of a helping hand here, Jeff, on that process in terms of labour, materials.
Well, clearly it's going to be different for everybody, and you just have to expect prices to be the ending costs to be 2 or 3 times what you estimated them to be. Being super remote like we are, we're 2 hours from the closest, big smoke metropolis, and we're half an hour from a town of 200. And so getting tradies to even want to come out and do, and take our money from us was often extremely difficult. And because we were sort of doing it during the nascent stages of a lot of different technologies, be it composting toilets or gray water systems or hydros or what have you, for one example of many, an electrician may have been going, oh, wow, I can do hydros, it's electricity, and all of a sudden they show up and, they really aren't up to snuff. So, a lot of the scheduling we did, you know, we were able to say, okay, we're going to have a crew on such and such a day, and we're going to get the roof delivered, and, you know, we'll put the roof up. And sometimes those schedules worked, and sometimes they really didn't. And so, and often when we lined up tradies, if they showed up at all, and they weren't good, we'd have to stop them. You know, we'd have to say, I'm sorry, but that's not really working for us. Or if they didn't show up, either way, we'd have to actually go out and learn how to do it ourselves. And we ended up doing a lot of stuff that we didn't expect to do ourselves, just because there was no option, because we were really remote.
Good on you. Thank you. Dean's going to come on in a second and just give, it's a little note here. He'd like to answer this question. From my background and training point of view, what I do basically straight up front is to suggest to people that whatever happens, allow yourself some contingency around time and contingency around budget, because they're the two things that are going to be the most difficult. And there are people out there who can actually do professional scheduling for you. And one of my questions coming up is about professionals, engaging professionals. But I'm just going to throw to Dean Lombard, who'd like to answer the question live. Dean, would you like to say something? Thank you.
Sorry, no, I wasn't trying to answer the question. I was just marking the question that it had been answered. So go to your next question, please.
Sorry, I misread that then. Another couple of questions popping up. Thank you for the people asking the questions. Do I need insurances? So it's all about the insurances. So who'd like to answer some question about, you know, the pros and cons and covering yourself around insurances? A hands up for one of the panelists who'd like to answer some questions about insurance, how you went about it, what you need, maybe some costs involved, or, you know, pros and cons around insurance. Yep, Matt. Thanks, Matt.
Well, yes, you do need insurance. Even if you didn't need it legally, you should have insurance. As an owner builder, you are responsible for the safety of everyone on building site, at least in Queensland. So you actually also have to do a safety course for as an owner builder. So it's a two-part thing here in Queensland, maybe Australia, right? So you need insurance. You need liability insurance. You want to insure your building as well in the state that it is, and then you need insurance for any materials that might get lost or damaged on site, stolen. And so, yes, we spent about $1,000 for the insurance to build our house, and that included liability and the materials on site and the building as it was in a stage, whatever stage it was at the time something happened. Well, luckily, we didn't need it.
Okay, and was this something? I mean, I raised it, of course, when I'm teaching owner builders here. Who gave you the sort of heads up or the advice of where to go and what was required in terms of insurance as well? We're on this issue. We had a few questions pop up. One of you just throw your hand up about who, where, how, why, you know, that sort of thing.
I think I just googled
Sorry,
owner
Matt,
builder.
yep.
Sorry,
Go,
is that
Matt.
still me? Okay, I just googled it. Owner builder, building insurance, and then you get maybe 3 or 4 hits.
Okay, my advice for the general audience would be obviously to clearly check in with your authorities, check in with your current insurance broker. Obviously, ask lots of questions. If something's told to you verbally, clearly you need to get it in writing. But I'll be checking with the authorities and ensuring they had all necessary, insurances as per the authorities, and then making decisions around what you'd add on top of that in terms of some of the guys have raised some issues around theft, damage, etc. So my advice would be to, as I said, just check with your authorities, check with your current broker, ask lots of questions, and ensure whatever happens that you're covered for the absolute minimum required by the authorities, and then add on any extras over and above that for, to cover other areas. But definitely, don't even think about not getting, get the insurances that you require, and then add on from there. Question coming in for which authorities? Might be a little bit difficult to answer across Australia, but it would generally be your regulatory building authority. Obviously in Western Australia, I know who they are, and a little bit of knowledge across Australia, but it depends which state you're in. Maybe you can tell us Queensland. Who's in Queensland? You are, Matt, just tell us in Queensland who the authority is that handles the regulatory building and the insurance, or at least where to get started.
The insurance regulatory. I think.
Yes, yeah.
I don't even know.
Okay, no, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I get there's what I was suggesting is each state has their own building regulatory authority.
BQA, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then you've got in Victoria, you have your own one. In South Australia, I'd be checking in with them first, and then clearly, as we suggest, is that you contact a broker and ensure that you have all your necessary insurances in place. One of the areas is called contractor all risk, public liability. Those sorts of insurances are required. One of the questions I've got here, I'll keep asking and repeating the questions coming in from the audience. One question I've got is, in terms of professionals, who was your professional best friend during the process? Maybe even before, during, and after. Who do you suggest is an essential professional to have on board as a backup person during the process? I'll throw to who's okay. Matt's hand's going up again. You keen, Matt? Go.
Sorry.
You're going.
I'm hoarding. Basically, my private building certifier. I decided to go with a private certifier because I found it difficult to deal with council the first time around. So the second time around, that was much easier. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And Jeff's hand's going. Go, Jeff.
I just wanted to go back to the insurance and the agencies. And this is more specific to what I experienced because I'm surrounded by national park and national forest. And so when we had to build the hydro, not only did we have to go through the Shire, but we had to go through the Aboriginal councils. We had to go through the Crown, who own the land along the riverbank. We had, and the Northeast Catchment Authority. So we had several different agencies, and you may experience the same thing depending on what you're doing and where your location is. And then the other thing about insurance is you really got to look into the small print because we were hit by the 03 fires while we were still building, and I had just spent 2 years milling my own timber and drying it out, stacking it, nice and drying it out. And then the fires completely consumed all that timber. And as it turned out, if you have it stacked, it's not insured even by your building insurance. If I had put sticks up and just started the frame, it would have been covered by the insurance. So you really got to get the fine print and get somebody who really knows insurance.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, clearly my suggestion would be you go to, as it suggests, local authority. In Western Australia Building and Energy. In Victoria is the Victoria Building Authority. Matt, you mentioned the Queensland organisation, the name of the Queensland Building Regulatory Authority.
QBA.
Yep, QBA. Yep, there you go. Thank you for that. But yeah, as we suggest, read the fine print, ask questions, get something in writing, speak with the broker, and ensure that whatever happens, you have all the minimums in place, and then make decisions around how much further you want to take it than that. So a quick question popping up back onto the quick questions from the audience. Recommend a good book. One of you spoke about a couple of books. I think, again, sorry, we'll just go back to Matt for the second. I think you mentioned 2 books, Matt. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually called Australian Owner Builder, and the other one is Australian Builder Renovator Owner Builder or something like that. I could have a look in my cupboard here.
Okay, maybe we can. I think we've got access to get things put up on. Yeah, we'll try and access that that information for the person asking the question. I can tell you, in Western Australia, we have a book called. In Western Australia, we have a book called Today's Owner Builder, and that's by a gentleman called Mark Ruby, R-U-B-I-E, at Today's Building Services. So that's what we have in Western Australia, and we're going to try and get a hold of the other books, names of the other books for you. I'll throw to another question in terms of, what advice, what's the sort of straight up, the first thing that comes to your mind in terms of what advice you'd give to an owner builder? Daryl, we'll start with you. Just straight up, the sort of first thing you think and the most important thing, advice at going out to an owner builder about to start or even during the process.
Well, mine would be to use an architect. Yeah, we didn't want to design our own house, but we kept our architect right through the process to assist us. So for us, that was invaluable.
Great, thank you. And Trevor, the first thing that sort of comes to you believe to be the most important thing that to watch out for?
Well, if you're sort of hands-on in the process, I think one of the key things that really strikes you is just how many decisions you have to make. And as much homework as you do, or as much as I've done, and I've done a lot, thought about it for years and been around the building industry on the periphery, it can be overwhelming, and you can very easily, you've got to be careful with your decision making that you're not too glib on the really important things. You can occupy a lot of time over mundane, funny things. And I liken it to, say, driving your electric car to Sydney. You can do a lot of things right and get to Sydney well. You can make one mistake and then end in a pretty serious state. And similar things can happen with your building process. And, you know, when a tradesman asks you something, well, what do you want to do about this? Don't avoid the temptation to say, oh, I have no idea. Yes, there's decision making. Well, if you can identify the decisions that will have long-term impact, and that, I suppose, you need to be very clear about what is really important to you in the process and filter your decision making through that.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I just had a note coming in from Dean to suggest we need to sort of do a bit of an outro. There's a question come in here. It's a little more complex. I might try and see if we can get speak to Dean about how to deal with a question that's there about the ones going to Trevor about engineering, slab, and one to Matt as well. So I don't know we're going to have time to do it break it into sections, but maybe Dean can advise us about how we might be able to get answers to that question and get the information back to the person. It's now time up, so thank you very much. I got a bit excited, and as I say, didn't get a chance to do you know, full proper outro, but thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you for those listening on board online here, and as I say, I'll try and get speak with Dean to see if we can answer a couple of questions that we didn't get to you know, straight up. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back over to Dean. Thank you.